Welcome, everybody. This is Patricia Lucia of Wildflowers and Present Tenses, and I'm very happy to have a very special guest with me today, Isaac am I saying it right, Soria?
Soria.
Soria. I know Isaac going all the way back to my cafe days when he used to come to my cafe, and really got to know him there. A real creative soul, and really, and it's so nice to have the experience of having been a place where young people gathered and kind of watching young people grow up and do their creative thing in my little creative cafe, and then being able to kind of extend beyond the cafe has come and gone, and yet there are these wonderful souls in my life, creative souls that I get to continue to watch grow and develop and expand in all kinds of wonderful ways. And so
I mean, it's a legacy in my heart, so
yeah.
I still talk about it to this day.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those experiences, and it's a little surreal to kind of be that for people, but I'm really happy to have provided that for you. So we are going to talk about the publishing process. And it's not like I am a pro, but I've kind of been through the process of my first self-published book, and I'm in the process of kind of writing my next two. And Isaac is wanting to write and publish a collection of poetry, I think. So we're gonna kind of jump in, but I'd really like Isaac, could you just let folks know a little bit about you and what you're doing and your current creative endeavors?
Yeah, sure. I am a writer. I've been writing ever since I could remember. Like my first little tiny book that I wrote was about my little dog in first grade. So ever since then, I've been writing little stories and stuff like that. But currently, right now, on the creative career side, I do write a lot of poetry. I did start a novel that I just never finished because life.
They're happens. They're hard to finish.
They are. I could take a creative writing class in college that did get me started on that. But my poetry is geared a lot to love, romance, a little bit of substance abuse, and as well as being biracial, awesome. and homosexual on top of that. Also creatively, I am a drag performer. I don't say drag queen.
I absolutely love your stuff. Can you tell people where they can find your drag stuff, because it's just really breathtaking what you do.
Thanks. You can follow me on Instagram. It's CASSIDELAC. Cassie de la C. The C used to mean a word that isn't very loved by many people because it spells out the C word. But I have dropped that, so it's just Cassie, which if you spell backwards, you get my government name, which is Isaac. Isaac Cassie. But yeah, you can follow me there. I do a lot of digital drag. I did have my own show in San Francisco before quarantine. And now I am just doing digital drag shows and providing space for a lot of performers, especially drag kings or drag non-binary drag performers, to give them a creative space, especially POC performers. We make sure that we have that space for them, because we do realize in the drag community, unfortunately, it is run by mainly white cis gay men. So we try to break through that ceiling and kind of give more exposure to those kind of performers.
Good.
Yeah, so that's a little about me. Otherwise, most of my writing I kind of keep private to myself, and if you just so happen to find my non-drag Instagram, you'll see it.
Yeah. Now, do you journal?
Not really. My creative process when it comes to writing poetry, because my emotions get really, really intense, and the only way for me to really express it, because I'm an Aquarius and I come off emotionless.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I tend to bottle up things. So my process of that is that I go and put it on writing.
All right. So you're an Aquarius, but can I ask what your moon is? Do you know your
I
moon?
believe also Aquarius. I'm very Aquarius.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah. I'm
Thank
a
God for poetry.
Thank God. I mean, I've expressed my poetry a lot. I mean, your cafe was the first place that broke my stage fright, where I first started reading my poetry out loud, especially when we did open mic with Cleo.
Yeah.
So I do thank you and appreciate you a lot because of that. Because if it wasn't for that, I may have never been a drag performer. I would never have been able to speak in other open mics and other places across the country. So I do applaud you and give you a lot of respect for that.
Wow,
So,
Isaac, that is really, really moving to hear.
yeah,
You never, and it just goes to show you, you never know. Like, for
never know.
instance, you don't know all the people that you inspire. And maybe one
Thank
day,
you.
one day someone will be saying something very similar to you about, like, if you hadn't inspired me, I may never have, you know,
Yeah.
we just, we often have no idea how we inspire others. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, thank you. So
So that's awesome. How exciting. So you have some questions for me, and
yes.
I'm just gonna, and I will answer them the best I can. You can kind of give them to me in any order. It doesn't really matter. We'll just,
Um, I'm gonna start. Why self-publish and why not get a publisher?
so for me, there are a lot of established writers
Mm-hmm.
who are doing self-publishing right now. And one of the reasons is because you get to keep more money in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
There's just when you go through a publisher, how you get paid by royalties, and of course they take a chunk and so forth.
Yeah.
Now there are I think there are 5 major publishing houses in the country, and they're kind of tough to get into. So if you generally, in order to get into a publishing house, you need an agent. You need to get an agent, and then that agent pitches you and your book, and it generally tends to be a long process. So a lot of the argument in the old days was you really have to go through a publisher, because if you self-publish, it's not really legitimate. You're just not going to be respected. And that has shifted in the last, 15, 20 years. And now there are a lot of there are people who have published traditionally who are now publishing, self-publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it has really become a more respectable, much more respectable than it was, when I was your age. It's like, no, you couldn't. It was like the mark, it's like a black mark on you if you self-published. It meant that nobody wanted you. Your writing was not up to par and whatever. And that just isn't true anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So what else can I say? So it's a process that you control. You control it. You control every aspect of it. You get to create and design everything,
Mm-hmm.
all along the way. So self-publishing, but it also means that you have to take responsibility for every aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you go through a major publisher, you still have to do a lot of the promoting yourself. You still
Mm-hmm.
have to kind of get out there and promote your book. They'll do some, but you still have to do a fair amount. In the self-publishing world, there are a few categories. Like, there are what you call vanity presses, and
Mm-hmm.
those are these publishing houses that are for self-publishers, and they say, listen, give us $3,000 and we're going to do everything for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is, and then they'll do all of they'll do all of the little things that you might have to hire out people to do. But in the end, in my opinion, I don't think that it's worth it. I think if you're going to self-publish, it's in my opinion, it's best that you find your avenue, and then get into the nuts and bolts of it, which I did. And even though it does seem like it might be a lot of work, if you're somebody who likes to kind of roll up your sleeves and say, all right, hey, I'm going to learn how to do this and I'm going to be a pro, right? By the time I'm finished with my first one, I'm going to be a pro and I'm just going to be able to publish, self-publish like that, if you're willing to do that, like, the first one, you're going to have that learning curve, right? You're going to have a lot of things. You're going to make a few mistakes, hopefully not too many, and you're going to learn your way through it. But once you go through that first one, then you're golden. Then you can you'd be like, okay, next, I'm going to publish my next one and so forth. So, and that's kind of, that's the route that I decided that I was going to go. Also, because books of poetry and collections of short stories generally tend to be picked up less by major publishers. Because
why is that?
Fewer sales.
Let's see.
They are less sellable than like that, the pop fiction, those books that they can sell, they fly off the shelves. So generally when something tends to be more literary, or like a book of poetry, those are, a book of short stories, even by pretty well-known authors, they tend not to sell as much as, the books that you see in the window of Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble or whatever.
They're not the big sellers. So generally people do go the self-publishing route. And so, for instance, with your book, a book of poetry, if you do open mic nights and you travel around and do open mic nights, then having a book of your poetry is awesome, because it just means that in your circle and as you move around, if people really love your poetry at an open mic night, they'll buy your book.
Yes.
They'll buy your book. So in a way, every time you show up at an open mic night, you're promoting your book. It's already there. You're already doing it.
Yeah.
And so even
I will to add on to that, because I've gone to a handful of open mic nights to read my own poetry, which is part of the reason what's motivated me to publish my own book of poems, because every time I've gone to an open mic night, I was told that I should definitely write a book because I love my poetry for whatever reason. I was never really confident about my poetry, thinking it was ever good. But because of reading your poems out loud at open mic nights, it does give you the confidence and the feedback, because they're complete total strangers. They're not your friends. They're just like trying to gas you up and be like, "Oh, your poetry is great. We love you."
Yeah.
But they'll love you no matter what. So, but like, I've seen a lot of poets who would go to open mic nights and have a collection of their books with them, and telling people how they can purchase them or sell them right then and there, so that way they can get some kind of revenue off of it, and have a piece of the poetry passed around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's kind of a whole built-in way of of promoting your book. That would be awesome. Yeah. So look, that was the process. That's the kind of the process that I went through. I to be honest with you, I didn't really give a whole lot of thought to going through a major publisher, because I had made a commitment at the beginning of 2020 that I was going to publish my collection of short stories. Finally, it's like, just do it, right? Just, what are you waiting for? Let's do it. So I made that commitment, and that, and I was going to do it in 2020. So if I had tried to sell myself to a major publisher, it would have been a much longer process with no real guarantees that they would have picked me up, because it's this whole process of sending your query letters, doing all of this stuff, getting in, all of that stuff. And it's just kind of like, no, this is much more direct. I made my goal. I set my timeline, and I'm going to follow it. So I'm going to do it myself.
Let's see, hold on, sorry, my phone locked. Come on. Why did you decide to publish your first book? What was your motivation in that? Was it, for revenue reasons, or was it for, to leave your stamp on the world kind of thing, or what was your reasons for it?
Yeah, and that's a really, really good question. I think, well, you see, I've always been a writer too.
Hmm.
And I got a master's degree in creative writing in New York City. And so, and got a New York Times fellowship in creative writing and whatever. So it's kind of like I've been a writer my whole life too. But I was always doing other things and putting my focus in other things. And I realized that one of the reasons why I hadn't actually published was because I wasn't as good at applying discipline to
Hmm.
personal endeavors as I was to applying discipline to other endeavors. So,
Hmm.
in some ways, it was a decision to be true to myself and to make a commitment to me. This is a
Hmm.
commitment I'm making to myself. I am going to publish a collection of short stories. I had stories I had written. I
Hmm.
had stories, in my collection. My collection has a couple of stories that go back almost 20 years. So I had these short stories and added to them and kind of just made a commitment. So it was about making a commitment to myself as just part of my own growth process. It's like, you're going to do this, you're going to make a commitment to yourself. I wanted to commit to having the discipline because for every 100 people out there who have a book in them or have a book idea or have started writing a book, less than 10% actually publish.
Hmm.
So I'm not the only one who's kind of dealt with having maybe the skill or the talent or having the stories even, but not actually following through. The vast majority of people don't follow through, and part of it is because of the discipline. And that was a personal goal of mine. I wanted to focus my discipline on myself and get it done and set that goal. Um, and it really is part of my legacy. So Wildflowers and Present Tenses is the first book in a series. So I planned on doing a series of 3. So that's the first book, and then the next book is the cookbook with short stories from the cafe. And the third book, I'm still thinking about what that one's going to be, and that'll be the 2022 one. So I've kind of made this commitment to do that. So yeah, it's part of my legacy. That kind of like my little mark on the world. Revenue was never really part of what I was thinking of. I did want my book to be read. I'd like people to read the stories. I think the stories are kind of interesting and kind of follow my life from Springfield to New York to Florida and all the adventures in between. So it's been interesting. Um, and that's it. That's kind of those were my motivations for wanting to kind of jump into it. You know.
Um, how did you find the best self-publishing site for you and your writing?
Well, you have to. I think for me, I had to think about what form I wanted my book to be in. So
Hmm.
some people want to put out a book and they're cool with just it being an ebook. It's like cool, it could be an ebook. It doesn't have to be I'm putting out an ebook, and people do that all the time. Whereas
Yeah.
for my book, I felt like, okay, I could do the ebook thing, but I also felt like it was the kind of book that should also be in hardcover. Like I had pictured, this should also be like for you in your book of poetry. Like you can do it in an ebook, but I can so see it in a hardcover. People
Yeah.
often will do collections of poetry in that hardcover version. So I wanted both. So then I started looking for, when I learned kind of about these vanity publishing companies, and they're out there, Outskirts Press and all these different ones that'll charge you $3,000-$4,000 or whatever to publish. When I realized kind of what's behind them, I said, okay, vanity presses are out. I'm not doing that. And then I started looking at Amazon, and Kindle, and I really wanted to look, and because they only do ebooks, I wanted to find a press that would do both. And so I found Ingram Spark, and that is that's the site that I went with, was Ingram Spark, because they do both the ebook and they do the hardcover, and they distribute internationally.
Oh, cool.
They distribute all over the world, and I liked that. So I thought that Ingram Spark was the best one for me. Now, you can put your book out. I haven't done this, but you can actually have your book go through both Ingram Spark and Amazon. You can do both. Like, you don't have to, you just have to make sure you don't have exclusive. Like, when you go through, I think it's KDP through Amazon, they will offer you all kinds of deals to be exclusive with them.
Mm-hmm.
But that just means that that's the only place you can put your ebook out through. And I don't really think we should be exclusive to anyone. I think that we should put our, put it where we want, and nobody really
Make it
has.
accessible for people who want it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's kind of why I went with, that's why I went. Yeah.
All right. Let me keep going. When you decide to go publish, when you decide to also copyright your written material, what's the process of copywriting your written material, and how does that go about?
Yeah. So, your work is pretty much, like, once it's out in your book, it's pretty much copyrighted. But what I did was, you go to the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress has a site, and you register your book. So let's say you've got a PDF file with the interior of your book, right? The interior of your book is all set. You've got your PDF file. You go to the Library of Congress. It costs $65.
Okay.
And
I expected a lot more, but okay.
yeah, no, and it's a pretty quick process. You upload it. Of course, you give the title, your information, the title and everything. And it takes 2 or 3 weeks, and then you get a letter in the mail that says you are registered with the Library of Congress.
Cool.
The Copyright Library of Congress. It's great because you can also, when you publish, one of the first pages in your book is the copyright page, and it lists, all of that. And so it's nice to kind of have that information too, the Library of Congress information on that as well. So that's it. The Library of Congress gives you a number. So, but pretty much everything, like your book is, it is copyright, you have rights to your book. Doing the Library of Congress is definitely an official stamp of copyright on your book. And I think in all your poetry, and I think when you're putting out poetry, that is important, because people lift poetry all the time.
Would you recommend it? Because for me, like, I constantly post my poetry on my non-drag Instagram. I keep it on my private, Instagram. So it's not really public to everybody, but like just people who I let follow me. Would you recommend to keep it down if you're going to plan on publishing it, or would you recommend it doesn't really matter?
That's a really good question. Because I've put poetry up to, and I was putting my short stories up, and then I stopped. I only would give like a little part of my short story, and then say, tell them where they could find the full story. In terms of copyright, I mean, it's kind of hard to control. Like, people can cut and paste your work and take it and put it anywhere they want when you have it online. But that's the thing. It's like, you also want people to read your stuff.
Yeah.
You might want to be selective about what you put up. And also, I think having a website with your stuff is also another way to go, where you have a website and you list some of your poetry there.
Can we actually dive into that a little bit more?
Sure.
About having a website? So do you recommend for authors, like, even especially like new authors like me, to set up their own website? And what's the best website tool that you would think that is beneficial for someone starting from scratch? Because I know there's stuff like Patreon and.
I haven't really used Patreon in that way. But just like in terms of a website, you really want a website where people can come, they can find out more about you, and they can buy your products, they can buy, they can buy your book, and you can also get subscribers and send them a poem a month. Here's a poem a month to my subscribers, that sort of thing. Or do a little newsletter where it shows you doing a show and then maybe a poem or something personal. Like, people really love that through your website. And then you can sell your book through your website. You can do direct sales through your website, and you will make more money each book with the books that you sell from your website. So, the books that I sell from my website, I make more than, say, the books that I'll sell on Amazon.
What was your website tool for you to like have that set up?
I use GoDaddy.
Okay.
I use GoDaddy, and I like it. It's pretty simple and straightforward, and I was able to create my own website with it.
Okay.
And I was able to set up a way for people to buy my book through GoDaddy using Square. Really simple, straightforward. And people are able to sign, I'm able to get a mailing list and send people, emails through GoDaddy. So it was easy to design. It really wasn't hard to put together. So that's I've heard about Vox. I've heard about different places for starting out. I also think GoDaddy is pretty reasonable, and of course you'll want to buy your domain name. I'm learning more and more how staying consistent is really the best way. So you'll see my Instagram is Patty Lucia Writes. My Facebook is Patty Lucia Writes. My website is pattyluciawrites.com. I keep it pretty consistent. So if someone gets an email from my website, like say they buy my book and I want to send them like an email, then it's from Patty Lucia Writes. So in that way, it's pretty consistent, and it's not hard to do, but definitely having a website is really important. So I just give thought to what your website name would be.
Mm-hmm.
As a poet, it could be Isaac. It could be your name and poet.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to have a Tumblr. That's where I used to put my poetry to begin with, but I took it all down because Tumblr just wasn't for me, or it's like it died down for me. But like I did my initials, which is IS, so is writing. That was my initial way of like producing like what I had. But I would probably most likely will change that, especially since I've been incorporating a lot of my poetry into drag. So like, for example, like for the very first time, I did a pageant earlier this year in January before the shutdown. And I had included one of my favorite poems about my father and performed it as a drag performer.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I think that is awesome. And it's just really, really unique. So whatever name you come up with in terms of, because it does seem like if you had a web page, or like if a website, or your Instagram or whatever, it does combine both drag and poetry. So I think having that in combination, however you do it, would be really great. You just have to think of that, like think of how you're going to market yourself as a drag poet.
Yeah.
Really, that's kind of, that's what you are, just, poetry and drag or something, like, something, but it's
dragging words. It's a dragging words.
Yeah.
Words that drag. There you go.
Yeah. No, drag poetry. I don't know. I think it's kind of.
There's a lot of play on words that I can do with that.
There's a lot you could There's a lot you could do with that. Did I answer that question
Yeah,
pretty
you did.
fully?
Yes. When you decide to self-publish, just on an average, I know it varies from types of books and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How much does it cost in the end?
Okay. All right. So let's talk about, I'm going to break it down. So when you're self-publishing and you're doing all the work yourself, right? There's going to be, it's almost like a la carte. Okay. So you're going to have like a la carte costs. All right. So one of the first things you're going to, of course, you're going to have your domain name, right? You need to purchase your domain name and hosting and have your website. Okay. So that, but you got to give that a little thought. All right. So let's say you're ready to jump onto Ingram Spark and you're going to start the process. One of the first expenses you have is buying an ISBN number.
Okay.
An ISBN number. Now that's going to cost you $85. If you go on to an Amazon or even on Ingram Spark and they say, we'll give you a free ISBN, don't do it. Pay for your ISBN. Pay that $85 because then you are the publisher. You completely own it 100%. If a company owns your ISBN, then they are the publisher. They kind of own it. You don't want that. You want to be the one who is the ISBN owner. All right. So sometimes people are on a tight budget and they're like, oh, they're going to give it to me for free. Isn't that great? No, it's not. It's not great. No. So buy that ISBN number. Now, here's another thing about ISBN numbers. Let's say you want to do the hard copy, right? You want to do the hard copy book, but you also want it in an ebook form. You need an ISBN number for each one. So you need a separate ISBN number. So I had to get 2 ISBN numbers, and now I've had to get a third one because now I want to put my book out in paperback. So you have to get an ISBN number for each form of it. So hard copy, an ISBN number, ebook ISBN number, paperback ISBN number. So that could be 3 ISBN numbers for you.
Well, that can come out to be almost like $300 right there.
It could. So I would just, think that I think that for you, I would just start off like, I definitely think hard copy is really, that's poetry in a hard, in a hardcover book. It makes sense. And also there are just so many people doing ebook now. So it is important to have that ebook because, there are people who are like, no, I don't want to carry a book, but I'll go online and buy it. And they can also buy it they're cheaper too.
Yeah.
So people like,
especially if you can carry like a QR code around, like people can, like if you were like to go to open mic nights and stuff like that, like I know QR codes have been around for a while, but especially with the pandemic, like they've kind of made more usefulness out of it. For drag performers, we attach a QR code so that way you can see our tip information, so that way you can tip us virtually.
Yes.
So I can see that now also like helping out with, authors, like, carrying like your own QR code with you that would link you straight to your website to
absolutely
buy your book and XYZ.
That's right. So, yeah. You want to make it as easy and seamless as possible for them to get your book. That's the deal. So, anyway, did I answer that question fully, or was there more to say about that? The expense. Oh no, there's much more.
Yeah. So we got through the ISBN number.
ISBN number. So also the copywriting, which is that comes later, but that's a $65 with Library of Congress, right? So it's $65. You're going to want your book. Well, I know it's a book of poetry, but having a professional editor look at it is important. And also your book needs to be typeset.
Okay.
Now, typeset means that they set it up, they take it from, you're working on your computer, you're putting it all together and everything, you got your pages, but it's got to be set up in a format that is for a book, right? So
Mhm.
that's a typesetter. All right. So you've got somebody who's going to edit it. They're going to look at it. They're going to look at how you've structured it and whatever, and make sure that everything, the font is right, everything is right. Okay. So there's an editor. That's an editor. You need a typesetter, and you need a cover designer. Those are
Okay.
for me. I write. I'm really creative. I started the process of designing my own cover, and then
Mhm.
said, no, 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 no. I'm going to leave this up to a graphic designer who can do it much better than me. Let me not fool myself in this. So, editing a book of poetry, that could probably be that, for an editor, because they charge by the hour, maybe a couple $100.
Mhm.
Typesetter, you're going to, it will need to be typeset. You're going to get two files from the typesetter. You're going to get the one for your hard copy, and you're going to get one for your ebook, because they're two different things. All right. And that could be about $300.
Mhm.
And then the cover design, it really depends on who you go through, but that could be another $200 to $300 for
Now,
somebody to do your cover design. Yeah,
if I wanted to do my own cover design, that would still be okay, right?
it would still be okay. Yeah, I mean, they usually encourage people to get or to get, like, I know some. I worked with a young woman who wanted to do my cover design. I didn't really have to pay for it, but I gave her credit for
Mhm.
doing it. And my cover design is awesome. It's like so far and beyond what I would have done on my own, because she's a young professional. She, that's what she does. And I can share her information with you too. But
I mean, I personally, because of like college and stuff like that, like I learned graphic design in college.
okay.
So like, I've, and as well as like doing digital drag, like I've
Oh yeah.
self-taught myself a
Yeah.
lot
So
of,
you might be in a position where you can do it yourself, and it'll look really good.
yeah.
Another expense is you should probably have a professional picture taken of you for your author pick.
That I could probably do on my
Yeah.
own.
So you might be able to do that on your own, but that could be another expense.
Yeah.
It's important to have like a professional looking picture for your author picture. Um, those are the expenses. And what I did was I went through a site, and I highly recommend it. It's called Upwork.
Mhm.
Upwork, and you go and you basically you put in what you're looking for, and then there are these folks who have those skills, and you look at their their rates, you look at their reviews and so forth, and then you pick one and see if you can match up with. I got a great typesetter, so a woman who did the typesetting for me, and she did a really, really good job. And she was
Yeah.
not, she wasn't really that expensive. But I think that those are the expenses that I had. And then of course, when your book is ready, then you are going to want to order it and have it on hand to sell. And so,
Because they don't give you a free copy, obviously.
right, no, no. And so,
Unfortunately.
yeah, so you would order, and of course, it's you just kind of, yeah, you order what you can so you can have it on hand and whatever. But yeah, those are the expenses. Yeah, so it probably, I don't know if you added that up, but yeah.
It's probably like at least $1,000, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like, just like with all the copywriting and setting up a website,
Right.
like around $1,000 is what you probably have to invest or save up to.
Right. And it's not all at once. It's like as you go along. As
Yeah.
you go along, these are the expenses that come up. Yep.
Any
I,
other legal things I should look into besides copywriting? Because I know for novels and stuff like that, it's been highly recommended, especially if it's about your own personal experiences, to publish it as fictional to avoid any lawsuits, especially if people feel offended that you use them as a character in a novel. But what about in terms of poetry? Since, I do write about like my own personal experiences. My mom recommended it should be published as fiction, but to me, I just think it's poetry, so it's up to meaning. It's not really detailed and saying exactly who is who, unless my dad wants to like sue me. But
yeah, my collection of short stories, I mean, I call it a memoir because it's all based on things that actually happen in my life. And in some of the stories, like the relationship stories, they're the toughest ones, right?
yes, they are.
Right. So in one story, I changed the woman's name, and then in another story, I actually her name, there is no name. Like, I don't. She's just her in this story. On your copyright page, there's a line that says some of this is, though this is based on real experiences, some of it has been fictionalized and some names have been changed and blah blah blah. So that is actually part of a standard copyright page. So when it comes to poetry, I don't think that you really have to, like, I'm not particularly concerned about people suing me or whatever. But yeah, no, I wouldn't really worry about it with poetry. I
So it's based
really,
off of feelings and emotions. Like, to me, I don't think that's like problematic. Like, everyone's feelings are valid in some shape or form.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't really worry about that. And I would also think, there's always there's the dedication page. I would give that a little thought too, like how you want to use your dedication page.
Yeah,
And
how did you decide to use a dedication page?
I decided to dedicate the book actually, it was to a woman, I was in a brief relationship with, but who had such an impact on my life that she is part of the kind of the motivation to do the project in the first place and to live my truest and best and most authentic life. Like, she is someone who inspired me to do that. So I dedicated it to her. But she is anonymous. So in my dedication, I actually, and it's her with parentheses around it. The parentheses have particular meaning that if when you read the story, you get why there's parentheses, but it's like to her. And I put like something like to her and all the women whose stories have mingled with mine, and to the woman who calls me from the threshold, which is actually a dedication to a future partner, like the woman who hasn't come into my life yet. So, so to do that, because I like
it keeps it very vague and open.
I kept it really vague and open to those. Some people are very specific.
Yeah.
For my mother, to my mother, or to Sam, or for Sam, you know what I mean? Like, some are really, really specific. So it really depends. I mean, yours could be, for, to my drag community.
Yeah.
Or there might have been somebody in your, who inspired you. There might be a few people who have inspired you. So you can do whatever you want on your dedication page, but that's always really, that's a fun part of it. And also the acknowledgments at the end too is an opportunity for you to thank all the people who have inspired you and supported you. And people love that too. Like when you say, hey, I put you in my acknowledgments because, I really appreciate how much you've supported me in all my endeavors. And people are like, oh, and it also motivates them to buy the book.
Right? Just send a mass letter to all my exes. By the way, I acknowledge you. read all the poetry I wrote because you broke my heart.
And I actually acknowledge all my exes in my acknowledgments, not by their full name, but by their first name. Yeah, the whole list. What the hell? Because it's all about all the women in my life. So it's all about, the women who have influenced me. But yeah, so I did that. whatever.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's
It's
my
fun.
first
I'll,
name. It's
say that again.
only my first name only.
Yeah, just first name only. Yeah.
Um, uh, all right. When it comes to tax season, because I kind of got into this issue because I mean, I always had worked for like a big corporate company. I
Right.
can't say their name, unfortunately.
That's okay.
But I'm furloughed from them anyways. Eventually, one day I will, but at this moment right now, I legally cannot. But um, when I became more serious about drag and had my own drag show, I was actually getting checks, and you have to, obviously submit that to the IRS, and you get taxed for it. So when it comes to being a self-published author, how does that affect you when it comes to taxation, or like the IRS, and when it comes to tax season?
So do you have a business? Do you have a any kind of business set up?
So currently right now, I do not. I mean, when you file for taxes as a drag performer, you just say that you're self-employed. And so you don't have like a businessing license for your drag name per se. But you do file as a performer or as an artist. So I'm just kind of self-curious if that is the same thing when it comes to being a writer, as like, you are a artist that has artwork and this is what you get paid for. With drag, it was a little more consistent because I was getting weekly checks from the bar. So I had to, obviously submit all of that. Um,
Well, I honestly think because this book is also is part of that journey as well. And
mhm.
so you may want to consider setting up an LLC.
Okay.
Yeah. So you may want to consider setting up an LLC under, it could be, Isaac, your name LLC or whatever. Or your name performer or whatever, but and then that is what people would write checks to, right? And then you set up a business account that's
Mhm.
separate from your personal account. And the reason why that might be beneficial for you is then every piece of makeup, everything you buy associated with your drag business is
Mhm.
now a business expense.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Travel
mean, I keep track
expense,
of my expenses, but like,
say,
yeah. So I'm curious, that's the same thing with writing in a sense, or as a
yeah,
self-published author.
yeah. So you can also do that. Um, it really, I mean, like, I think you probably make a lot. You probably continue to make more money doing drag than selling books.
Not at the moment, but yeah. Yeah. This is
Um,
reality. Not right now. Not in quarantine, but yeah.
yeah, well, that's true. So, but you could actually, it could be under the same LLC. In other
Mhm.
words, any income you get from your books goes into that account. Your stuff from your drag goes into that account, and which means all those expenses we just named, those are business expenses. And
Mhm.
so it does mean that you're filing, you're filing your business. You do like a business filing or whatever. That
Yeah,
could
because
end up
you can also claim your expenses to help you get tax breaks as well.
exactly.
So, I mean, and this is for the audience to also to keep in
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, and it really, yeah, I mean, at this point for me, I haven't set up a separate business account, but I've done separate business accounts before, and I know that I could easily set up a business account. Now, in terms of like taxes,
Mhm.
like the sales tax, like say you sell a book and then there's a sales tax. What I do with this, just to keep it simple for now, I'm kind of seeing what's going on. But when I order my books and I sell my books from my website, right? People are sending
Mhm.
me money. I pay the taxes on the books to the printer, and
Mhm.
so what I'm not I'm not obligated to collect taxes, sales tax, because I've already paid the tax. So what I'm charging them incorporates the sales tax, you know, along with it. So I'm not collecting anything. So I don't have to, you know, send the state sales tax money every month or every quarter or whatever, because, you know, I'm paying it. Yeah.
And that's a really good point to bring up, because I mean, like, to me, like, I wish before I started my own drag show, I wish I had known a lot more about taxes as an artist and how that affects you, because in the end you will end up paying a lot more than you really should be, because you didn't keep track of your expenses and all that stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. And there are a lot of expenses.
More money out of people who don't make a lot of money to begin with. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of expenses associated with, you know, doing what you do, you know, like, you know, the wardrobe, the makeup, all of that, you know,
a lot.
It's expensive. So
it gets up there. And once you kind of like get the ball rolling, it kind of just eventually, like, you have a way of managing, you know. You don't buy makeup every week. You only buy the necessities, especially for me in quarantine. Like, I'm not going to buy any new outfits or wigs, because why? It's quarantine. I don't have the money. I don't have a steady income, because like back in bars and stuff like that, people would tip you, you know, tons of money. And then when it comes to digital drag, people just sit there and watch and don't tip you anything.
Yeah.
So it's somewhat frustrating, but you know, it is what it is. Can't make people do anything that they don't want to do.
Yeah, though there's got to be ways for people to be able to, you know, to send you money. You know what I mean? Like with digital drag.
And there is. It's just people choose not to. People rather buy White Claws rather than tip a drag performer. I joke about it a lot in shows. I'm just like, if you're drinking a White Claw, you can definitely tip a drag performer $5. So,
Yeah, it's their priorities, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would just, if you talk to other drag artists, is it a business for them? Like, do they do a business?
It depends on the level of, like, me and one of my drag sisters like to think as each drag performer enters a certain tier in their drag career.
Right.
And I mean, like, and this is like kind of an awful term, but when you're a baby drag performer or like just a beginner, and you know, you're just kind of figuring stuff out. You're just, you know, learning what works for you. You're learning your style, your personality, your unique look to you.
Yeah.
And what that means to you, as well as what that means to an audience, and what works for an audience, and what gets people attracted to your art.
Right.
Because anybody can just throw on a wig and, you know, put on some makeup, and, you know, whether it's good or not is, you know, up to your self-evaluation, as well as, you know, how it's perceived by an audience.
Right.
And then when you get the ball rolling, and then you start entering like hosting gigs and having your own shows and getting booked constantly, and actually making revenue off of that, is when you start worrying about taxing and how you know, put that to, when it comes to tax season, and reporting that to the IRS, especially when you get checks from bars. Because I know a lot of drag performers that are very talented that refuse to host their own show at bars because they want to avoid getting taxed. Because most bars will force you to submit your tax information. A lot of them don't want to do it because it affects their unemployment, or if they're a full-time drag performer and they just want to get booked and get paid underneath the table, which is, you know, illegal, but you know, that's kind of just the nature of the business.
So you get like an $11.99. Is it $11.99?
Something like that. Like, I get a form, and then I have to like submit it, and then I have to submit my expenses with it. And the thing that hurted me the most was when I was doing my show, is that I would get a check from the bar, so that would be my show budget. So let's say I got like a $200 check, and then I would like book a certain amount of performers, and then I would pay them out each for doing the show. And that would be mostly through cash. So when you do that through cash, it's not recorded. The government can't see or prove that you paid expenses for booking other people. And so then the government can't tax those drag performers. So that's where it gets lost in translation.
So you take the hit for it. You take the hit for
Yeah,
everything.
you take the hit for it, and people think it's like, oh, you make tons of money. I'm like, no, you really actually end up in debt.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's things to think about, and people don't really think about it often.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that for me, I'm gonna, as an artist and as trying to be a leader in the community, I'm trying to making that stuff a lot more vocal, so people
Yeah.
understand that aspect of it, because people think producing is, oh, you have tons of money, you can do whatever you want, and you should be paying all these performers. I'm like, yeah, but they're also upfronting the cost for you to be able to perform. And when it comes to tax season, they're the ones losing out, and you're the ones that are just sitting on your couch,
Yeah.
enjoying the tip money you got.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think,
it's a different perspective that a lot of people don't want to hear about. So
yeah. I think it's important, like artists in general, like, those of us who are artistic, we tend to be really resistant to the business end of things.
yes,
I'm an artist, I'm creative. I just want to do the creative stuff. Why are
yeah,
you bringing me down with all this
business. But
business stuff?
unfortunately, business is what makes the world work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though I am a creative, I do have a very strong business background because of my, the career that pays the bills per se.
Yeah.
Because of that is why I even treat drag and the rest of my creative outlooks as a business,
Yeah.
because it is important to do that in order to become successful. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
you know, all these like famous artists didn't just like wake up one day and like, I'm just going to be creative. Like they have to have some kind of business sense into it in order to become financially successful, I should say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that there are so many creative people out there who haven't really, the world hasn't seen what they've created because they haven't figured out the business end of it. They haven't figured out how to get their stuff out there, unfortunately. So, but yeah, no, it sounds good. I mean, I wish I had more to tell you about the business end of the writing thing. I'm kind of just getting my feet wet, and I know exactly what to do if I need to set up an LLC, because I've done it before, for my other business. So
I did it for the cafe with
oh
stove.
yeah, I did it for the
So
cafe and for my product line and whatever. So I kind of, I know how to do that. This has been lovely.
yes.
And I'd like if you could let people know how to get a hold of you or how to follow your work.
Yeah.
So,
So my Instagram is the best way to get a hold of me. It's again at CASSIDELAC. That's my drag. If you are really curious about my non-drag page, it is, I have to even look that up, see it's like how often I go on there, but it's at Soria 23. That's when I
okay.
started Instagram. I was 23 years old. But yeah, or you can email me also, and it's my drag email that I use for most business stuff, and it's same as my Instagram, CASSIDELAC
Awesome. Awesome. Right. So if folks want to find you or follow you, they can find you.
All right.
Awesome.
I'm gonna let you go. I have things to do. I have drag stuff to do that
Yes.
because I've
Yeah.
been avoiding things for the last 4 days. So
All right. Well, listen, Isaac, it's been a real pleasure. I look forward to our next conversation. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. This has been a real pleasure for me.
same here, Patty, and all the love to you. And I can't wait for our next Zoom call.
All right. I love you, Guy. Bye.
Love you too.